of course, there are all the things that you don't see but that enormously benefit our reporting once we arrive, which are the conversations that Richard has with Brian and with the teams just constantly tell us. I mean, he at some point said, you know, it's time to come in. I don't know how you're going to get in. We'll find a way. You can't come in with a large team. And then my work really began because the airports were closed and we had to find a way in. I mean, they had shut everything down. So I think I'd raised this before, that the Bureau was essential because they were our eyes and ears, but they also, there's an ongoing conversation that there's one thing that people see on the broadcast, but we are literally in constant communication about the situation there, and that is how we keep ourselves informed. And then there is always an assumption with a network that we can kind of come in with our resources, but the truth is, we were like everyone else. We had exactly the same issues about trying to get into a country that had effectively shut down, and then we had the same safety and security issues too, because we were staying. Our bureau is basically in Tahrir Square, right on the edge of Tahrir Square. We share a building with Al Arabiya, so we were targeted. And the hotel that we stayed in was also on Tahrir Square. So at the end of the day, you know, we were,
right there.
Yeah, with everyone else, yeah.
When I arrived, I was told, you know, that the big danger was getting from Cairo Airport into town. That was sort of, and then I should do everything I can to show up during the day. That the drive's a lot safer during the day than during the night. So I was coming from Amman, and I got on a flight that was scheduled to show up at like 2 in the afternoon, but it was delayed, and it was delayed, and it was delayed, and it was delayed, and I showed up at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And the driver for the Times, a guy named Ahmed, picked me up, and we ended up sort of going on this very, very hairy adventure, where part of what I learned on it was how hard it was that in a place that you don't know very well, period, and then in a volatile situation in a place that you don't know very well, period, that who you're dealing with and how they're reacting to you is a very hard thing to judge right off the bat, and it can get dangerous if you do it the right way or the wrong way. And so I was in a situation where the driver, who is a guy from Cairo, so I trusted his judgment, he ended up sort of, you know, there was these checkpoints set up by these neighborhood people that were essentially just trying to defend their neighborhood about who knows what. But they also bought into the idea that, you know, some of them bought into the idea that the revolution was, you know, Israeli spies and Western, you know, the sort of conspiracy theory stuff was very well accepted by many people out there. And so I was, you know, a white guy in this car with, and we kind of we showed up on a checkpoint, and I slowed down, and he sort of saw an opening and just went for it and just bolted ahead. And all of a sudden we heard gunfire from behind us, and a guy on a moped started driving after us, and it turned out there was another checkpoint like 200 yards down the road, with a whole bunch of dudes, and they surrounded us, and we had this very, very hairy moment where our car was surrounded. There was a guy with a scimitar banging it on the hood of the car, and I had been told not to say that I was a reporter because the Mubarak thugs were targeting reporters. And so it was a moment where that was my first instinct, but it ended up being wrong because these were not Mubarak thugs. These were just people defending their neighborhood. They didn't know who we were. It turned out after the gunshots, people were yelling that we had fired the gun, and so people like broke into our car and were looking around for the gun that we had been firing, which was not ours. And there was sort of a very tense moment that once I decided, okay, I am going to say that I'm a journalist, and my camera and my ID and my everything ended up being fine. It ended up being that when they believed that I was not an Israeli spy, that everything was fine. And it was just this realization of the judgment of understanding the tensions happening on the ground, not just the news, but also how you as an individual can operate safely is a very hard thing to judge. And having people on the ground who know what's up when you land is really critical. And so, you know, I was fortunate, because I'm with the Times, I'm fortunate enough that people, you know, everybody that I was with knew more about the situation than I did. So I had to sort of put my faith in them.
It was a constant fear that we had, is that in using technology to contact, call, to save information on our computers, and stay in a hotel that is likely infiltrated by security personnel of the regime, and to know that all of these people can very easily, with modern day technology, access your information. And that certainly turned out to be the case, right? After state security services were raided in Egypt, they found files and information of just how much, from anything to Skype calls to photographs, that technology had allowed people to access. something that we had feared when we were on the ground there, certainly protecting these people who were very vulnerable.
In a story like this, the cooperation among the various news entities is really impressive. And you know, that is something that certainly in Cairo happened, and that relationship continues. But we all helped each other security-wise. A lot of people were attacked. You know, everyone banded together, but they also did in terms of information, in terms of getting people out or in. I mean, that it became very much, you know, an incredible cooperative effort. And so it's competitive, but in stories like this, I think I was really impressed by how everyone worked together.
So in Egypt, you know, one thing we saw is these people who were actually, perhaps the guy who you interviewed, you know, who's one of the people who started this, they did what's called field tests, where they'd go to the markets and, you know, exactly, in areas in the days leading up to January 20th to make sure that this was a collective movement and that no one was going to be left behind simply because they don't have access to the internet. Then in the days since this, we've seen that now the United Nations has declared internet access to be a human right, which is controversial in of itself, but I think, you know, speaks really bounds about the kinds of lessons that we're learning coming out of this, and how not only is, I think, the Arab world undergoing a form of democratization, but I think the media is, and frankly, I think the way in which we understand our roles as journalists.
This is the first time now that we have another access point for information. I mean, to have people tweeting from places like Iran or other places where we have to assess security, we have to decide if we can get a reporter in. I mean, there's a lot of criticism about mainstream journalism and where it is and where it's placed, but believe me, the intent and will is absolutely there to have our people there. Well, it's just, you know, I'm certainly not going to make a decision to send somebody there if I know we haven't gone through the decision-making process and the proper one. So Twitter has been incredible, as has Facebook. I mean, it's been incredible. It's an incredible reporting tool and a good launching point for us.